For years, men have heard two completely opposing ideas about prostate health. Some say that ejaculating frequently can weaken the body. Others claim the exact opposite, that ejaculating regularly can help protect the prostate. Then the inevitable question arises: who is right? And even more importantly, is there really a number of ejaculations that can influence prostate health? Or is all of this just another myth repeated on the internet? Before answering that, we need to understand something that many men have never clearly learned. What exactly does the prostate do in the male body? The prostate is a small gland, approximately the size of a walnut, located just below the bladder. But despite its small size, it plays an extremely important role in the male reproductive system. It produces some of the fluid that makes up semen, a fluid that helps protect and transport sperm. So far, everything seems simple. But there's a detail that many people have never noticed. The prostate doesn't just produce fluid, she needs it to release this fluid regularly. And that raises an interesting question. What happens when this fluid remains accumulated for too long? Some experts believe that when prostatic secretions are retained for long periods, irritation of the prostate tissues can occur. And this irritation can develop into something called prostatitis, an inflammation that can cause quite bothersome symptoms. For example, difficulty urinating, sensation of pressure in the pelvic region, the need to urinate several times during the night, or discomfort in the lower abdomen. Now think of something curious. If the prostate constantly produces fluid, wouldn't it make sense for this fluid to also be eliminated regularly? That was precisely the question that began to intrigue some researchers years ago. They put forward a simple, but very interesting hypothesis. Perhaps ejaculation functions as a kind of natural prostate cleansing mechanism. But there was a problem. For a long time, this was just a theory. There weren't enough large studies to confirm this idea. Until a group of researchers decided to investigate the matter much more thoroughly. They accompanied thousands of men over nearly 2 decades. And what they discovered ended up surprising even the scientific community itself. Because the results showed more than just a small difference. They revealed a very specific pattern. A pattern that began to appear repeatedly among men with lower risk of developing prostate problems. But before revealing what that pattern was, there's a curious detail in this study that almost no one mentions. One detail that can completely change the way you think about this subject, and that's exactly what we're going to find out now. For a long time, the relationship between ejaculation and prostate health was treated more as speculation than as science. Some doctors believed there might be benefits. Others said there simply wasn't enough data. But everything started to change when researchers decided to analyze this issue on a much larger scale. They didn't just analyze a few hundred people. They studied more than 30,000 men, and they accompanied these men along almost 18 years. This study became known as Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, conducted by researchers at Harvard University. During this period, participants answered detailed questionnaire about various aspects of their health. Among them, food, physical activity, medical history, lifestyle habits, and also something very specific: the frequency of ejaculation over time. The idea was to observe if there was any relationship between this habit and the risk of developing prostate cancer. Over the years, the data began to reveal something interesting. The researchers divided the participants into groups. Some ejaculated only a few times a month. Others had moderate attendance. And some had a much higher frequency. And when the results started to be analyzed, an unexpected pattern emerged. Men who reported a higher frequency of ejaculation appeared to have lower risk of developing prostate cancer. This immediately caught the attention of scientists. But the most important question remained unanswered. Is there a specific frequency that seems to offer more protection? To find this out, the researchers began comparing the groups even more carefully. They analyzed men who ejaculated 4 times a month, 7 times a month, 10 times a month, 15 times a month, and even more. And that's when a pattern began to emerge. It wasn't a random difference. There was a frequency range that seemed to appear repeatedly among men at lower risk. But before revealing what that frequency was, we need to understand why might this happen. Some scientists believe that ejaculation may help eliminate substances that accumulate in the ducts of the prostate. Others suggest that this process may stimulate cell renewal in prostate tissue. There is also the hypothesis that sexual activity helps regulate certain important hormonal processes. But even with these theories, the researchers were cautious. They did not claim that ejaculation alone prevents disease. Prostate health depends on many factors: age, genetics, lifestyle, metabolism. Even so, the data revealed something that was hard to ignore. When the scientists finally identified which group exhibited the lower risk of prostate cancer, the results surprised many people. Because the number found is quite different from what most people imagine. But before revealing that number, there is another problem that many men begin to notice after the age of 40, problems related to the prostate. Some men begin to notice signs such as waking up several times during the night to urinate, weaker urine stream, a sensation of a bladder that doesn't empty completely. If you've ever heard someone talk about these symptoms, you probably know how annoying they can be. Therefore, in addition to healthy habits, many men also seek natural ways to support prostate health. There are nutrients and natural compounds that are being studied for their potential contribution to healthy prostate function. If you'd like to learn about one of these options that many men have been using as part of their men's health care routine, I've included a link in the description with more information. Now, back to studying. Among all the groups analyzed, one clearly stood out. A specific group presented lowest risk of prostate cancer among all study participants. And when you find out what the average frequency of that group was, many people are surprised. Because that number isn't what most people imagine. And that's exactly what we're going to reveal now. After nearly 2 decades analyzing data from more than 30,000 men, researchers arrived at a result that ended up being cited worldwide. They observed that men who ejaculated more frequently had a lower risk of prostate cancer. But the most curious finding appeared in a specific group. The men who repeated approximately 21 ejaculations per month. They presented the lowest risk among all participants in the study. Now think about that for a moment. 21 times a month. Does this mean there's a magic number? Should all men try to reach exactly that frequency? Or is this information being misinterpreted? This is an extremely important point. Because the study did not claim that there is a hard and fast rule. He only showed one statistical trend. In other words, within the group analyzed, men with a higher frequency presented a lower risk when compared to those who ejaculated very little. But the natural frequency can vary greatly from person to person. Age matters. Lifestyle influence. Relationships are influential. And even hormone levels can have an influence. In practice, when we talk about approximately 21 times a month, we're talking about something close to 4 or 5 times a week. For some men, this seems like a lot. For others, it seems completely normal. But there's a curious detail that almost no one mentions when citing this study. Many men who hear about this number end up making a mistake. They start to think that simply increasing the frequency of ejaculation will automatically solve any prostate-related problems. And this is exactly where things start to get more interesting. Why prostate health? It doesn't depend solely on the frequency of ejaculation. In fact, there are factors that can have an even greater impact, and many men completely ignore these factors. Then an important question arises: if ejaculation can help, why do some men still develop prostate problems even though they have an active sex life? The answer to this question begins to emerge when we observe other daily habits. And some of these habits are extremely common. So common that many men do it every day without realizing the impact this can have on the body. When you understand what these habits are, you begin to see why some men maintain a healthy prostate for decades, while others begin to experience symptoms relatively early. And one of these habits might be much closer to your routine than you imagine. Let's talk about that now. After many men discover that number cited in the study, around 21 ejaculations per month, the most common reaction is immediate. They think, so the more, the merrier. But this is precisely where one of the biggest misconceptions about prostate health lies. Because the prostate doesn't respond solely to the frequency of ejaculation. She responds to general state of the body, and that difference changes everything. Now think about it. If frequency were the only important factor, then simply ejaculating more would solve the problem. But is that really what happens? Why then do some men with active sex lives still develop prostate symptoms? This is the question that many people avoid asking. And the answer begins with something that seems simple, but has a profound effect. The prostate does not function in isolation. It's part of a larger system. It is influenced by blood circulation, hormones, metabolism, inflammation, and even by how you live your most common routine. i.e., it's not just about what happens in the bedroom. It's also about what happens in the office chair, at the dining table, and while sleeping. And one of the first silent mistakes is a sedentary lifestyle. Many men spend hours and hours sitting down, at work, in the car. No sofa, in front of the cell phone, in front of the computer, and this seems harmless. Until you realize the cumulative effect of it over the years. Sitting for long periods of time can impair circulation in the pelvic region. And when circulation isn't working well, the local environment can become more conducive to discomfort and inflammatory processes. Now stop and think. How many hours a day does an average man spend sitting without even realizing it? Perhaps much more than he imagines. And this may be one of the reasons why some symptoms appear slowly, almost without attracting attention at first. But that's not the only mistake. There is another, even more common factor. Food. Diets that are very high in ultra-processed foods, excess sugar, excessive alcohol consumption, and low-quality fats can increase inflammation throughout the body. And when the inflammation increases, the prostate also feels the impact. This raises an important question. Is the problem simply a lack of ejaculation, or is it a lifestyle that is silently inflaming the body? This is the part that almost no one talks about. Because it's much easier to look for a quick fix than to confront the full range of habits. Another important point is excess abdominal fat. Many men think of their abdomen only as an aesthetic issue, but abdominal fat isn't just about appearance. She has metabolic activity. It influences hormones. It disrupts the body's balance. And since the prostate is extremely sensitive to hormonal changes, this can have a greater impact than many people realize. Now imagine two men. They both ejaculate with similar frequency. But one of them is more active, sleeps better, means sweet, and eats well. The other person is always tired, sleeps poorly, eats poorly, spends the day sitting down, and lives under stress. The question is inevitable. Do you really think that the prostates of these two men will age in the same way? Probably not. And this is precisely where many people misinterpret the study. The study did not say that ejaculation compensates for bad habits. He simply showed that she can be an important piece within a larger context. But there is yet another silent mistake, and this one seems too small to be taken seriously. But it repeats itself every day. Many men postpone going to the bathroom because of work, being busy, or simply out of habit. They hold their urine for longer than they should. This may seem irrelevant at the moment. But when this pattern repeats itself for years, the body begins to pay the price. Small, repeated habits have big effects when accumulated. This is how many problems begin. Not in a dramatic way, but quietly. Therefore, when experts talk about prostate cancer prevention, they almost never focus on just one variable. They speak together. Physical activity balanced, diet, body weight, hydration, and healthy sexual activity. All of this together influences the environment in which the prostate lives, but there is an even deeper factor. A factor that is at play even when the man thinks everything is normal. It changes the body slowly, progressively, and often invisibly at first. And the most curious thing, this factor can influence the prostate even more than the frequency of ejaculation itself. When you understand this, you begin to realize why some men go decades without major problems, while others begin to feel changes very early. And this factor begins to act without asking permission. Let's talk about it now. There is one factor that profoundly influences prostate health. But many men almost never take it seriously. This factor is the aging along with hormonal and metabolic changes in the body. Because the truth is this, the male body doesn't just age on the outside. He changes from the inside. And many of these changes begin even before the symptoms become obvious. The prostate is extremely sensitive to male hormones, especially testosterone and DHT, which act directly on prostate tissue. Over the years, this hormonal balance changes, not all at once, not in a dramatic way, but slowly. And that's precisely why so many men take so long to realize what's happening. At first, the signs seem small. Waking up one more time during the night to urinate. It takes longer to start the urine stream. Feeling like your bladder hasn't emptied completely. 2. Notice that the flow is weaker. None of this usually causes immediate alarm. But here's the question that almost no one asks at the beginning. What if these small signs are already the beginning of a bigger change? This is where one of the most common conditions in men's lives comes in. Benign prostatic hyperplasia, also called benign enlargement of the prostate. This process is extremely common with aging. But here's the really interesting point. Not all men age in the same way. Not everyone develops symptoms with the same intensity. Not everyone experiences the same impacts. Then the question becomes even more important. If aging happens to everyone, why do some men suffer much more than others? The answer lies in the combination of factors. Genetics matters. Hormones matter. Metabolism matters. Inflammation counts. Lifestyle matters. And daily habits matter much more than most people realize. It's as if the prostate was sensitive to the body's internal environment. If this environment is balanced, the aging process tends to be more stable. If this environment is inflamed, unregulated, and overloaded, problems tend to appear with greater force. Therefore, the main lesson from this video might not just be about a number. It's not just about 21 times a month. It's not just about ejaculation. It's about understanding that the prostate responds to your entire life, and that perception changes everything. Because many people are looking for a simple answer, an exact number, a universal rule, a ready-made formula. But the body rarely works that way, and perhaps that's why so many men remain confused. They hear an isolated piece of scientific data, but they don't see the complete system behind it. Ejaculation can indeed play a significant role, as some studies suggest. But it is not a substitute for prevention. This is not a substitute for medical advice. It doesn't replace good habits. It does not replace paying attention to the signals your body gives you, and here arises an important reflection. How many men only start paying attention to their prostate when the symptoms are already disrupting their daily lives? Perhaps more than they should. And perhaps this is one of the biggest problems in men's health. Silence. Shame. The idea that talking about it is too uncomfortable. But ignoring the issue doesn't prevent the body from changing. Ignoring the issue only means that many people discover too late what they could have noticed sooner. So, in the end, perhaps the most important question isn't just, how many times a month? Perhaps the real question is something else. What is your lifestyle doing to your prostate today, without you even realizing it yet? And I want to leave you with one more question. If so many men worry about strength, energy, and performance, why is there still so much resistance to speaking openly about an organ that can affect all of this? Do you think men still ignore their own health too much due to shame, misinformation, or overconfidence? Leave your opinion in the comments.